In fact, I think the damage was so extensive that in some of the photographs that you were sending me, I was losing reference points as to what was part of the car.
We're so honored today because Dr. Glenn Jividen has flown in from Cincinnati just this morning. We're in the metal shop here in North Carolina. Quite the journey to get to this stage in the process of the restoration of your father's special car. And it's just an honor to do these kind of projects. And we've never restored a car for someone that's a one family owned car. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your relationship and the history of the car.
Well, my dad was apparently interested in cars from the beginning, because I know that in Western New York, where he grew up, he was racing go-karts, and then after he went to college and became a dentist, he got into the Air Force, and then he was stationed overseas in Tripoli, Libya, and he initially started out, I think, with a TR2 based on some of the photographs. Dad was quite a photographer too, so I have a lot, as you'll see, a lot of color photographs from the era, and he was doing a lot of airport autocross type events, and I think he noticed one of these 356s running around. My dad's like, I think I want one of those. And so what he did is he put a deposit in with the local dealer, and eventually was going to be sent to Max Hoffman in New York, where he was going to pick up the car after he was transferred back to the States. So a story that he related is that he had a deposit, and apparently that dealer was doing some things that the government didn't like, so the government raided and took everything, including my dad's check. He had to involve some of the base authorities to get his check. You know, being a young captain, you know, that was a lot of money to put down. And eventually he got that back. And he did tell the story that that dealer escaped the government crackdown by being shipped out of the country in a piano box.
Wow.
So it kind of reminds me of the Carlos.
Carlos Haybarth. Yeah.
So that was an interesting follow-up story. And then when he came back to the States, he did go from Western New York, where Dad was from, and picked it up from Max Hoffman and drove it back. And it spent most of its time in Western New York.
So tell me this story, because when we first met, and I can't remember the circumstances, we were in Cincinnati, weren't we? Someone introduced us, and he said, I have my father's car that he bought brand new. And of course, my lights went off in my head. I'm like, wow, that's cool.
Well, I do remember the initial conversation, because you were asking me, are you sure you want to do this? I mean, how about putting a nice paint job on it and making it a driver? Yeah. And I'm thinking, I like, it's a nice car, but I like to drive other cars that perform a little better. Right. And then you said, I think I'll come out and take a look at it.
Oh, that's right.
You did come out and take a look at it. Said, boy, the numbers are matching, and it's a one-family car. Yeah. And then I started getting enamored with the idea of like taking delivery again of a car brand new that my dad bought. I mean, to have that experience is something that I've gotten more caught up with as the restoration has progressed.
Yeah, I love that story. You know, what's so neat too is over the 20 years of RoadScholars, I come across all these stories of GIs. I mean, those were the folks who were buying these cars in the 50s because they were exposed to them, of course, in Europe. And so to meet someone like yourself, whose father bought this in Libya, I love the story of being in Libya. Captain orders this car, and he orders a Super, which is a rare engine option, and also black paint, red leatherette interior. But you know, that was one of the other things that captivated me about the story is the long-term one-family ownership history, but also these rare options on a T2 car. So it's kind of a really special
And I didn't
thing.
realize how rare that was. I'm just kind of wanted my dad's car restored, you know. And then when you told me, well, that's really kind of an odd combination. And then when I found out, you know, he did repaint it from black, and you told me, well, that was some of the problems involved with that. I go, oh, it makes perfect sense. Right. So then we moved to Colorado. And I think at that point it was painted, but some of my earliest memories is going skiing with my dad to like Breckenridge and places like that. And I was really a toddler, and he would take one of his buddies, and I was sitting in the back, and I fit sideways in there, and I was happy. I was back there, you know. So those are
cool.
some of my earliest memories. With the ski rack on the back, I guess there was a ski rack with some suction cups that went back into the bumper.
Like on the luggage rack on the back?
Yeah, so just you had a great time with that. And then we were stationed as a family back overseas, and so the car spent some time in Texas with my uncle, and so I got some dry time. But apparently it didn't solve the rust problems. So when we came back to the States in the early '70s, he went down, picked it up, and brought it back to Ohio, where it's been ever since until the restoration.
So before we get to the challenge of the restoration, maybe did your dad ever elaborate on any of the stories about picking it up from Hoffman or the? You know?
Unfortunately, not. That's one of the things that I regret asking more about, and I think that as relationships goes, you kind of go, I wish I would have asked more about these pictures here and these pictures there. Right. I just didn't know enough to ask those kind of questions. Once he passed, I found photographs that just kind of, as you've seen, of my mom, in the car, and he really, pictures of me as a toddler beside the car. So
that's wild.
He really liked the car. He did like actually doing some time trials with it and that type of thing in Western New York. So just a real car enthusiast, and I think that's where I got that from. To like cars and racing likewise. Yeah.
You think he'd be proud of you for?
He is. I have some pictures of that. Yeah, he was always he's proud of all of us kids.
Yeah.
And of course, I followed in his footsteps to be periodonist, and it was my choice to do that freely, and I feel very fortunate overall in life.
Yeah, it's evident he was a real car guy. Those photos. One of the reasons I'm excited about this project and completing this project is it's very few times where we get to show a car together in this instance. Yeah. And you get to show the judges, this is my father in his new car.
Yes.
And this is what it looked like.
These photographs are just incredible. The Ectrochrome, and being a periodontist, you're taught to take lots of pictures.
Right.
He took good pictures, and we still found some extra ones I told you about, and it really does make a difference in terms of the history of the car and bringing it to life.
It's a Willy Wonka's golden ticket for a restorer, because we literally can share these with the judges and say, this is as it, we know through information from Porsche archives and Porsche information, but here's also the car as delivered in period. And that's just unbelievable to have those kind of pictures.
And that's why I wanted to, as time went on, I wanted to really experience the delivery that my dad took of the same power of the car and as close as possible to factory delivery.
Yeah. And I remember coming to visit you to look at the car and looking underneath the car, and it had a lot of undercoating. I knew there were some issues, but one of the challenges, and it makes sense now, the New York, Cincinnati history of the car being driven probably in Colorado. The challenge of this project really was the corrosion. Not accident, but this car had serious corrosion that I've not witnessed, and we have difficult restoration projects come through our shop, some of the toughest.
So I have the dubious honor of being...
I don't know if that's something to brag about.
I noticed that on all the photographs, so... It's a dubious honor, I'll just say.
But one of the things that you allowed us, and such a privilege to work with you, is that you've really allowed us to authentically restore the metalwork to this, how these were produced in because this is an early T2 car. This was made in January of 1958. And one of the interesting things about this car is it has some T1, like the battery pan on it is a T1, and that's from the factory. So it was all these really research data, because like everything Porsche, there's no certain, like you can't just say, oh, in this period of time, because they were growing so rapidly. 58 was a very important year. Last of really this artisan skilled cars built by Reuter, because at this point total production is only 12,000 vehicles in T2 production. So
wow.
So Glenn, you sent me during the initial stages of the restoration these amazing pictures of your father. I'm sitting here holding them, but it's really more important. But these pictures are amazing to me, and this is obviously after he's come back from Libya and taken delivery of the car. And can you just talk about some of these photos and what's happening?
Well, apparently Dad, and again, we never even talked about it, but I know he did some, autocross type events and on closed courses. So it was almost like what we used to call Solo One, where basically you just almost like a time trial, but maybe some wheel-to-wheel stuff in there. I wasn't quite sure based on the photograph. So obviously taped numbers on the car, and of course that's the original color there. And what's significant about this is one of my most favorite photographs, is of course in the time, I guess the 550 was known as a giant killer. Well, in some of these events, my dad's, air-cooled foreign car was going up against some of the V8, Chevys of the time. And what Dad wrote in the dirt, in the dust of the side of the car is giant killer.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see that.
That's so great.
I love this. Is my favorite.
This is just one of the best images of Porsche history because it's written in dirt, giant killer. And then on the Cardex, this car was delivered with white wall tires.
Yes, that was.
So I just love that.
And then he did, which you can't see right here, he made almost like a custom overrider bar. I don't know if it was just to meet the basic requirements of the time, because it was
probably
something he didn't like. He didn't like, Dad did a lot of his own mechanical stuff there too. But back then, if you belonged to a car club, you had a little emblem. And that emblem I still have. It was from the car club that he belonged to in Libya when he was in the Air Force.
Oh, how cool is that?
So well, there it is right there on this picture right here.
Oh, there it is. You can see clearly the car club.
Yeah.
I love all these guys. Look at this.
Yeah, these are, I think that's his brother, and these are two friends of his, and I think that maybe my great-grandfather. I'm still trying to figure who that one is, but apparently he won something there.
So 58, or T2 Productions, the first year of the crest on the hubcaps, and he has it taped up there, but I just love these reference pictures. And then he's added, because he's added the mirrors.
We talked about the rear view mirrors there.
Yeah.
Of course, there's my mom in the car.
And this is before he put the mirrors on there. And and there's those colored crest hubcaps, which is so cool.
Another photograph here. There's a photograph of him in the car at the event. You can see some of the other cars that were competing at the time there. So
the challenge of this project, as you well know, has been the chassis. The box frame chassis, and as we know, that it's layered in some places up to 3 layers of sheet metal. But because of all that inclement weather driving over the years, this was literally rotted up to the subframe. So all the way up into the subframe and bulkheads and the chassis pans, obviously. But when this was repaired at some point, because he did a...
Yes, he did. He did a restoration, quote, back in the early 2000s, I think.
Yeah. And they used MIG welders, and they basically welded what they could using all kinds of different size sheet metal. The car was shrunk, so it was shrunk up 1/4 of an inch and wouldn't even fit into the factory jig of the specifications when we got the car here. The rear axle was crooked. I mean, there were so many things. We found MIG wire everywhere in the car. And again, the biggest challenge was using the appropriate sheet metal and constructing the car the way Porsche would have in late 1957, when this car was delivered in January of '58. But we've spot welded the car. We've corrected, obviously now it's within specifications, actual specifications of how it was delivered. But that was really the challenge of this project, as you well know. And then what I'm most proud of is saving most of the original body. As you will show in the video, we removed the nose and the front cowl and the rear end of the car, and we were able to save all of that. And to me, there's so much value in having the original body on your father's car.
Well, it's your level of detail that makes me feel good that, despite a great paint job, that underneath it meets these specifications that you're talking about of originality. The originality, yeah.
And I love your father's photos. It shows where he mounted the antenna here.
Yeah.
And you can see there, that's the, we've obviously repaired that. But per factory, or what the dealer would have done, would mount it on the driver's side. And that's one thing that we're discussing is, do you want a radio in the car? Or, because your dad did put one in, and that's kind of a
I'm trying to figure out whether it came with that or not. So
yeah, it's such a neat story. And he could have had that dealer installed, which,
yes,
And again, going back into this work, all these spot welds, creating the right transmission tunnel, the right dimensions of the depths of the stamps, and all these sub-bulkhead details of how these cars were constructed. That was the time-consuming part of the restoration. But I'm really proud of our team. I think it's ended up, this is going to be just like the split window we showed at Amelia Island, all the research and these details really pay off. Yeah, so it's really an interesting data point and time for Porsche production, and it's really been an incredible experience to restore this.
Well, I'm looking forward to the finished product after many years.
So I think that's the part today. We're going to walk around the car and look at things, but it's just been a journey to get to this stage, and really excited about the next final stages and seeing it go down the road.